A man who almost blew a plane out of the sky with his own shoes, a genius whose ideas were treated like weapons, and an escape artist who mailed himself out of prison. Today we're talking about more scary, evil prisoners. When people talk about the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, the name Timothy McVeigh is usually the one that comes up first, but McVeigh did not act alone. Terry Nichols was the guy behind the scenes who made the whole thing possible. He wasn't the one who parked the truck, but he was the logistical expert who spent months gathering supplies and helping to mix the explosives. After he was caught, a jury couldn't agree on a death sentence, so he ended up with 161 consecutive life sentences. Today, he lives at ADX Florence. His cell is tiny, he spends 23 hours a day inside it, he doesn't get to see other prisoners, and his access to the outside world is almost entirely cut off, and rightfully so. In late 2001, just a few months after the September 11th attacks, a man named Richard Reid boarded a flight from Paris to Miami. To the other passengers, he just looked like a tall, slightly unkempt guy in a bulky coat, but halfway across the Atlantic, a flight attendant noticed him trying to strike a match. When she looked closer, she realized he was trying to light a fuse sticking out of his sneaker. Turned out he had hidden plastic explosives inside the hollowed-out soles of his hiking boots. Passengers and crew ended up tackling him and tying him down using belts and headphone cords, whatever they could find, before he could set it off. The FBI later found the explosives were sophisticated enough to have taken down the entire plane. The fuse hadn't been damp from his own sweat. Reid didn't just get a life sentence, he got 3 of them, plus another 110 years. He was sent straight to the Supermax in Colorado and put under special administrative measures. This means the government monitors every single thing he does. He isn't allowed to talk to the media, and even his lawyers have to be careful about what they repeat. The feds are worried that because he's so dedicated to his cause, he could use a simple letter or phone call to send coded instructions to people on the outside. So he lives in a section of the prison where his window is angled so he can only see a small patch of sky. He's been in that environment for over 20 years now. In the world of the Chicago mob, James Marcello was as high as you could get. He was the boss of the Chicago outfit, the same criminal organization Al Capone used to run. Marcello wasn't a loud, flashy criminal. He was quiet, he was cold, professional, he stayed under the radar for decades. He was finally brought down during a massive investigation in 2007 called the Family Secrets Trial. The federal government used a member of his own family to testify against him, which connected him to several hits from the 70s and 80s. When he was sentenced to life, the authorities didn't put him in a regular high-security prison. They knew that a man with his connections and money would be able to bribe guards or run his crew from a standard cell, so they sent him to the Supermax in Colorado, kept him in a unit where he has zero contact with other inmates. David Paul Hammer became a nightmare for the federal system because of how dangerous he was while already behind bars. Hammer was serving time for various offenses when he made 2 brief escapes in the 80s. Then he was moved to a high-security prison in Pennsylvania. While there, he managed to convince his cellmate, Andrew Marty, to participate in what he claimed was a mock training exercise for another escape. Instead, Hammer used a piece of homemade cord to end the other man's life. After that incident, he was sent to death row in 1998, but Hammer was a master manipulator who spent years playing with the heads of investigators. He would claim he had secret insider information about the Oklahoma City, leading the FBI on long, expensive investigations just to see if he was telling the truth. He used these claims to get better perks in prison or to stall his legal proceedings, and when he strangled another inmate in 2018, he was moved to ADX Florence. He spent years in a tiny room with a camera watching him every single second. He died in 2019, having spent 40 years of his life in prison, the majority of which was in solitary confinement. Simon Trinidad wasn't a typical American criminal. He was a top leader for a guerrilla army in South America called the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC. This was a massive group that spent decades involved in intense conflict. The US government got involved after Trinidad's group took 3 American contractors into custody after their plane went down in the jungle. The FBI worked for years to get him extradited to the United States to face charges. Once they got him on US soil, they didn't take any chances with where they housed him. He was sent to the Supermax supermax. The authorities believed that if he were able to communicate freely, he could give orders to his fighters back home. For years, his legal team complained that he was kept in such a state of isolation that he wasn't even allowed to have a radio or a newspaper in his native language. The government has basically made him disappear from the public eye. For nearly 20 years, a man known as the Unabomber lived in a tiny wooden cabin in the mountains of Montana. From there, he sent explosives through the mail to people he believed were pushing society toward a technological disaster. When the FBI finally caught him in 1996, they found a man who was a mathematical genius but also obviously very dangerous. He was sent to ADX Florence for life, and the government treated his mind like it was a loaded weapon. The feds were so concerned about his ability to influence people that they took extreme measures to keep him quiet. For a while, he was neighbors with other high-profile inmates, but when the guards realized they were actually talking through the vents and sharing ideas, the security was tightened even further. They didn't want Kaczynski to radicalize anyone else in the prison. He spent the rest of his life in a cell that was almost the exact same size as the cabin he lived in as a fugitive. The FBI made sure his writings stayed out of the hands of other prisoners to prevent his ideas from spreading. He wanted to change the world with his actions, so the government made sure that his world was limited to 4 concrete walls until he died in 2023. Most people on this list are here because they're violent, but Richard McNair is here because he's an escape artist. It all started in the late 80s in North Dakota during a robbery that went sideways. McNair ended up taking someone's life and was handed 2 life sentences. Most people would accept their fate at that point, but not McNair. His first escape was almost like a movie. He used a lip balm to grease up his wrists, and he slipped right out of his handcuffs at the police station and just ran. He was caught, but a few years later, he crawled through a ventilation duct to get out of a state penitentiary. His most legendary move happened in 2006, though. He was working in a prison warehouse where they repaired mailbags. Well, he managed to build himself a shipping pod with a breathing tube, hid inside it, and then he had himself mailed out of the prison on a pallet. After he got out, he was actually stopped by a police officer while running down some railroad tracks, but he was so calm and charming that he just convinced the officer he was a jogger out for a run. He stayed on the run for over a year, traveling all the way to Canada before the feds finally caught up with him. In the mid-90s, Kristen Gilbert was a nurse at a veterans hospital in Massachusetts. To the families of the patients, she seemed like a dedicated professional, but behind closed doors, she was using her medical knowledge to do something unthinkable. Gilbert had an obsession with the adrenaline of emergency situations, so she wanted to create them herself. She would inject her patients' IV bags with massive doses of epinephrine, a stimulant that makes the heart race. This would cause the patients to go into cardiac arrest, triggering a code blue emergency. At first, the other nurses didn't suspect anything sinister. They did notice that people seemed to pass away more often when she was on the clock, but they couldn't fathom her actually causing patients harm. They gave her the nickname Angel of Death, though, as a dark joke. But the more it happened, the less funny that dark joke became. It wasn't until 3 other nurses officially raised concerns about the high number of deaths and a shortage of epinephrine that an investigation finally started. And in that investigation, they finally found Gilbert responsible. She was eventually convicted and sent away for life. Christa Pike is one of the youngest women ever to be sent to federal death row, and when you hear about what she did, it's easy to see why. Back in 1995, she was only 18 years old and living in Tennessee. She became convinced that one of her classmates, Colleen Slemmer, was trying to steal her boyfriend, Tatterall Ship. Instead of just dealing with the drama like a normal teenager, Pike recruited her boyfriend and another friend to help her carry out her deadly plan. They lured Slemmer to an abandoned area under the pretense of making peace, and then for over 30 minutes, Pike and Ship attacked the girl. Pike was reportedly obsessed with the occult and dark symbolism at the time, and during all this, she used a piece of broken pot to carve a pentagram into Slemmer's chest. After taking Colleen Slemmer's life, Pike didn't even try to hide it. She actually carried a piece of her skull around in her pocket and showed it off to people at school. Not only did she have zero remorse, she was proud of herself. She was soon arrested and given the death penalty. And she's been sitting on death row ever since, and at the time of recording this, she's set to finally be executed in about 5 months. Dandeny Muñoz Mosquera was the top hitman for Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel back in the 80s and 90s. The FBI ended up putting a massive target on his back after he was connected to the of Avianca Flight 203. The cartel had planted a device on the plane to take out a politician, but the explosion ended up taking out everyone on board, 107 people in total. Since 2 of those people were Americans, the US government made it their personal mission to hunt him down. When they finally caught him in New York, he was hit with 10 life sentences plus another 45 years. Feds didn't just want him locked up. They wanted him somewhere he couldn't ever escape. Back in Colombia, Mosquera had already escaped from high-security prisons twice. The Bureau of Prisons knew that if there was even a tiny crack in the security, he would find it. That's why he was one of the very first guys moved to ADX Florence when it opened. Everything is automated, and it's controlled by computers, so there's no keys he can steal, or there's no guards he can get to. He's been in total lockdown for over 30 years now, and that's where he's gonna be for the rest of his days. All that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, next time.